Hello, and thank you very much for joining our webinar today. Today's subject matter will be Marin Bidding, Folder Rules, and Exploratory Spend. My name is Mikiko Muraoka, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. Our presenter today will be Aaron Cohen, who is part of our analytics team. I will hand it over to him in just a second, but a couple of housekeeping notes. Please do keep in mind that this webinar will be recorded, and if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type them into the questions box within the webinar application, and time permitting, we'll get to those towards the end. This webinar and other webinars previously recorded are also available in the help section of our application, so please feel free to refer to that for additional subject matter and watching any of these webinars at your convenience. So without further ado, I'll hand this over to Aaron, and we'll get started.
Hello guys, and welcome to the Marin Bidding webinar. Today we'll be covering the topics of folder rules and exploratory spend. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Aaron Cohen. I work as a bidding specialist here at Marin Software. My job mainly entails working with clients to help them get started on bidding, as well as advise on any existing bidding setups that may need adjustments. So a large portion of the information that I give to clients is directly related to setting up their folders and putting the proper rules in place, or how these rules will affect results when actually trafficking. As Mikiko said, please hold all questions until the end of the webinar. You can feel free to type them into the message box during this presentation, and I'll attempt to answer them at the end. The first topic we'll be covering today is on the 7 folder rules. The most important thing to remember about these folder rules is that they are set on the folder level, and they will apply to every keyword in the folder. I would like to mention before we dive in that all information given today pertains to algorithmic bidding. That is standard Marin bidding. Other types of less commonly used bidding, for example position-based bidding, don't follow these same strategies. Also, while these rules will be applied to every keyword in the folder, they will not be applied to keywords on position override or on bid override. So the folder rules section can be found in the settings tab of your folders. You can get to the settings tab simply by clicking on the folder name in the bidding tab of the application. So first we have the boost, and then we have the applying bid section, which contains the remaining 6 rules. The way Marin decides on a bid to push to the publisher can be broken out into 4 different steps. First, Marin looks at historical information and your folder targets to come up with an initial target bid for each keyword. This target bid is the keyword's optimal cost per click. After this is calculated, we add the boost. Boost is set on the folder level and is added to every keyword just the same in the folder. Next, Marin will look to the applying bids rules, or the bid rules, to see if any changes to the current bid need to be made. And finally, a bid is now ready to be pushed to the publisher. So on the bottom of the slide, you can see these 4 steps: calculate bid, add boost, go through the bid rules, and then we finally push the bid. So let's start with the boost. The second step of the process, adding boost, is definitely one of the most important and highly utilized functions at Marin. Boost is a global multiplier which is tacked onto every keyword in the folder. Here are 3 examples of how the same folder boost will be applied to the original bid. So these 3 keywords right here at the bottom are all in the same folder, and this folder has a boost of 20%. So the first keyword bid, we calculate the target bid out to be $20, and then we go in to add the boost of 20%. So our new bid, before we get to bid rules, is $20 times 1.2, which is $24. We've basically increased the initial bid by 20%. The second keyword has a target bid of $2, and again, folder level boost of 20%. We multiply this $2 by 1.2, and we get $2.40. And in the last example, the keyword's target bid is 10 cents. We add the boost of 20%, and we get 12 cents. So the thing I want you to notice is how the $20 bid increased by $4, the $2 bid increased by 40 cents, and the 10-cent increased by 2 cents. This is because Boost is a percentage. So this, like other settings, results in a greater impact for more important keywords, or keywords which are spending the most. And again, I would just like to point out that this is not the final bid that you're pushing here. This is kind of getting to step 3 in the process. After this bid, $24, $2.40, or 12 cents, we would look to the bid rules before we push the final bid. And I will get to those later. So how do we use Boost? The most important way we use Boost is to control overall spend of the folder. Because Boost is added to every keyword bid, increasing or decreasing the Boost will have a direct effect on the folder's total spend. So here we just see this very simple graphic. Increasing the Boost increases the folder spend, decreasing the Boost decreases the folder spend. This lever on spend has a very strong connection to your margin or your CPL goals, which we will definitely dive into later. Now the second reason we use Boost, and this is just done initially, is to account for headroom. So the real question here is that if we're going to be moving Boost up and down to control spend, where should we start when we first traffic? The answer is very simple. We should start at the headroom. Because we're calculating an optimal CPC, and the headroom is the difference between the CPC and the bid, we use headroom as a starting point for Boost. The headroom that we choose is the average headroom over all keywords in the folder over the last 2 weeks. C is holidays, sales, and promotions. So seasonality, competition, changes in the market, these are likely to occur all the time throughout the year, and Marin is very good at adapting to these different changes. However, there are certain periods, holidays, sales, and promotions, where you might see a really large increase or decrease in conversion rates. Your traffic might really just shut off for the day depending on what's going on. Or you might know that you can afford to spend more in the coming week because you have a large promotion going on. So when this happens, in order to kind of anticipate this or account for this, you can use Boost to increase or decrease your total folder level spend. If you're willing to spend more, you might want to jump the Boost up. And if you really want to shut off a lot of your traffic, you would want to decrease the Boost. Now I'll run through the process of how to set the Boost when first trafficking a folder. I will be running through this process and all the others discussed in this presentation in the application right after this PowerPoint ends. Just a visualization, the first thing we want to do is bring headroom into the View Builder on the Bidding tab. And this is basically so we can use headroom as the metric when we're deciding where to first set the Boost. The second step is on the date range calendar. We want to highlight the past 2 weeks. And again, this is to get the average headroom over the entire folder over the past 2 weeks. And as we can see for this example, this folder, the headroom is 40%. And so step 3, when we set the Boost, we set this to 40%. Now, how does Boost affect performance? This is a very, very important slide. Basically, in the days after first trafficking a folder, we may see that we're spending a little, or too much. This is an easy adjustment that can be made right away with the Boost. If spend is too high initially, we'll decrease the Boost. If spend is too low, we'll increase the Boost. Oftentimes we need to kind of play with this lever to find a sweet spot to reach a point of optimal efficiency. So the perfect level of spend day over day that gets you exactly to where you want to be on your folder goal. Once we've reached this optimal level of efficiency, increasing Boost or increasing your spend at that point will increase your volume and decrease your efficiency. A decreasing Boost will, of course, decrease spend, decrease your volume, yet increase your efficiency. So depending on your goals at any given time, using Boost in accordance with this logic is really great to understand how to achieve those goals and to maybe increase or decrease your efficiency depending on what you want from Marin at that time. So here's just a couple of examples of when you would use Boost and how you would use it. So when we first traffic a folder, I'm not spending enough. What should I do? Very simple. Systematically increase the Boost until you reach an optimal level of spend. After a couple of weeks of trafficking the folder, you see your CPL is too high. What should you do? Well, you should decrease the boost until you reach an optimal level of CPL. And again, that's because decreasing the boost will decrease your volume, but it will increase your efficiency. Your margin is too low. What should you do? Well, again, systematically decrease boost until you reach an optimal margin. This is, of course, vice versa. If your margin is too high and you're saying you can afford to spend more and maybe gain a little less profit, you can go ahead and increase the boost and you'll be spending more at that point. And, of course, some other times you should use boost is for promotions and sales or holidays. Boost by publisher type and boost by match type. We do have an option in the application right under the boost setting if you click on or specify by publisher and match types where you can actually set a different boost for keywords across these buckets. So Google Exact can have a different boost than Google Phrase, which would be different than, say, Yahoo Exact. More often than not, this amount of granular control is very unnecessary. We like to treat all keywords equally here at Marin and gauge their bids based on solely individual performance. So we don't care if the keyword is broad or exact or what publisher it's targeting. If it's a good performer, we're going to bid it up. If it's a bad performer, we're going to bid it down. After boost has been applied, the algorithm will now look at the remaining rules. Here marked 2 through 7. So this is the step when we've got that $24 bid or that $2.40 bid or that 12-cent bid. We're now going to look to the bid rules and see which ones are going to affect the bid before we finally push it. These rules can be thought of as safeguards that are placed on Marin's bid. So while certain settings are typical best practices and actually encouraged, we don't want to overly constrain Marin from calculating bids optimally and most efficiently. So to further explain, I will go through each rule one by one. First, we have the bid cap. The bid cap is a global ceiling on all final bids in the folder. Basically, putting a bid cap of $50 tells Marin never push a bid above $50 to the publisher. Anytime a bid is going to be above $50, we're going to truncate it to $50 and then push $50 to the publisher. So here we have an example where you see where it says target margin bid. Now that's after step 1. Then we add the boost of 20%. And finally, we have 5166. And now we hit the applying bid rules section, or the remaining rules. And we see that the folder has a bid cap of $50. And because of this, on the bottom right, you can see final calculated bid, $50, not 5166. So when would we use this bid cap? We would use bid cap when we want to ensure that no keyword is bid higher than a certain dollar amount. However, this can limit efficiency gains on keywords which are deemed good enough to be bid higher. So if Marin decides that the optimal bid, given your goals, given your settings for this keyword, is 5166, we're basically constraining Marin and telling it to only push $50. More efficiencies could possibly gained at 5166. Also, we never want to use the bid cap when trying to control folder level spend, because of course we use the boost for that reason. So the next setting we have is the maximum bid change. Of all the applying bid rules, this is by far the most recommended and the most utilized. It is a best practice to always have the setting in place, most commonly at 25%. And for this reason, actually, when you first set up a folder or create a folder, you'll notice if you go to the rules section, this is already checked and placed at 25% by default. So what is max bid change? Max bid change basically stops Marin from changing bids by more than a certain percent each day. And putting the max bid change at 25% will tell Marin no bid should be changed by more than 25% day over day. So let's take a simple example to start. If a keyword bid is currently at $1 and Marin calculates the bid out today with boost to be, say, $3, setting the max bid change to 25% will force Marin to push a bid of $125 the next day, and then $156, and so on, each day increasing by 25% of the previous day's bid. Without this setting, the bid would just go straight from $1 to $3. There is a more complicated example on this slide over here. So yesterday's bid, or the bid before, for this keyword was actually at $4.24. And today we are targeting this bid out to be, with boost, $1.83. But before we push 183, we look to the remaining folder rules, and we see max bid change is enabled, and it's put at 25%. So today's bid, the next bid we push, is going to have to be $3.18, which is exactly 75% of the previous day's bid. And the next day, it will be $2.38. Each day it will decrease by 25% of the previous day's bid until, if nothing changes, we reach 183. Now, at this point you may be asking yourself, why not just go straight to the best bid possible as calculated by Marin? Why wait a while to get to $5 instead of just going straight to $5 immediately? Setting the max bid change will inhibit drastic spend increases or decreases on a folder when first trafficking, especially if Marin's calculated bids are far off from the previous bids. So if you were bidding everything at mostly $1 and we are trying to bid everything at $5, not having the setting in place would basically multiply your spend by 500% the first day around. Also, more importantly, this will allow for keywords to gradually approach a target bid and for more performance data to be accrued and gauged along the way. We don't want to overreact from data from the prior day. If all of a sudden a keyword spikes up in conversion rate, we don't want to overreact to that and bid it drastically up right away. We would rather target a high bid and slowly get there and accrue more data along the way. The only time we ever recommend not having the setting in place is when a drastic day-over-day change in spend is desired. If you want to cut your folder spend in half from one day to the next, or you want to double your spend, you're going to have to remove this max bid change, or at least increase it to be equal to or greater than the % increase in spend you want on the folder. Right under the maximum bid change is the minimum bid change. The minimum bid change is very simple, and it basically tells Marin, do not change a bid or push a different bid to the publisher unless it is a certain dollar amount different from the previous bid. So putting a mid-bid change of 1 cent says that keywords with a new bid that's only a cent different from the old bid don't even bother pushing the new bid to the publisher. In this example, we're actually using Japanese yen. Marin's platform has the capabilities to handle international currencies, and I'm illustrating that here. For this folder, they have a min-bid change of 1 yen. And as you can see, the target bid here is 192 yen, but yesterday's bid was 191 yen. And so today, again, we're not going to change the bid. We're just going to push 191 yen. The only upside to having this setting in place really is the reduction in runtime for really, really large accounts, say more than 1 million or 2 million keywords. This is a pretty old setting. Even in this case with such a large amount of keywords, the publishers have definitely improved their ability to handle such large data sets. As such, this setting is most often very unnecessary. Even small differences in bids in certain auctions can lead to efficiency gains, and we never really recommend putting this setting in place. Next is the position cap. When this setting is enabled, Marin will take a look at the last known average position before pushing a bid. If the keyword's last known average position is at or north of the position cap, here set at 1.2, Marin will not increase the bid. So basically putting a position cap of 1.2 states that no keyword shall be bid higher than its current bid if it's currently at or north of 1.2. In this example here, we can see that with Boost, we target the bid out to be $2.52. Before we push this bid, we take a look at the folder rules. We see that this folder has a position cap of 1.2. So we go and we look at the last known average position for this keyword. It is in fact at or north of 1.2. Therefore, the final calculated bid we push is the same bid we pushed last time, $1.07. So what is the upside of having this setting? This is becoming more and more debatable as time goes on. It used to be a strict best practice at Marin to put this position cap at 1.2 if you didn't have any other reason for putting it at any other place. It basically will prevent inefficient spend at any position higher than the position cap. And we used to see basically the most inefficient spend would occur from targeting positions 1.0 or 1.1, essentially basically overbidding at the very most top position. Nowadays, Google seems to be taking over the right rail, and the competition for these top positions is becoming more and more fierce. So depending on your historical data, your business goals, your model, it's really up to you where you want to put this. If you do feel that inefficient spend will occur when bidding for that top position, we'd recommend 1.2. If you're really hungry for that top position, we would recommend not setting the bidding cap. The position cap. It is a best practice to never set this above or south of 2.0 because this is likely to constrain Marin from gaining way possible efficiencies which are commonly occurring north of the position 2.0. The last two settings on the folders rules page is the always keep above bid for first page and the bid floor settings. So the always keep above bid for first page setting attempts to keep all keywords in the folder on the first page regardless of performance, and this basically uses the publisher first page minimum bid estimate as a bid cutoff. This only applies to Google. So this is just like the bid floor, which states to Marin never bid a keyword below a certain dollar amount, except it's using that publisher minimum first page bid estimate as your bid floor. That's the only real difference between these two settings. These settings have been made available at client requests. It is very important to know that above all other settings, we never recommend enabling these two at any time. Essentially, when Marin attempts to bid a keyword down, even off the first page, it's due to poor historical performance, and that this keyword is going to be very inefficient at any higher bid given your folder goals. So enabling one or both of these settings basically stops Marin from bidding these poor keywords down and leads to a ton of inefficient spend. So we usually do discourage users from enabling either of these two settings. That completes the explanation for the rest of the folder rules. Let's run through a couple of examples. So here for keyword A, if we take a look at the bottom first, we can see that the boost is set to 10% on the folder and the position cap is set to 1.2. So yesterday's bid is currently at $3. Today we're targeting a bid, an initial targeted bid of $4. That's step one. Now we're going to add the boost of 10%, and our new bid is $4.40. And now we have to look to the bid rules before pushing a final bid. We see that the average position for this keyword is 1.2. And the folder has a position cap set at 1.2. So our final bid is actually $3. Why is it $3? Because we're not changing yesterday's bid at all, because it is at or above the folder position cap. Now keyword B, if we look on the bottom, we see the boost is at 30% and the maximum bid change is at 25%. So again, yesterday's bid is $3. And today we calculate out the initial target bid to be $1. Folder level boost of 30% is added, and our new bid is $1.30. Now we look at the bid rules. We see that the max bid change is set to 25%. And so we are not going to push $1.30 right away. Actually, our final bid is going to be $2.25, which is exactly 75% of $3. Now, tomorrow's final bid will be $1.69, following the same trend, until we get down, if nothing changes regarding performance, to $1.30. So that completes the folder rules section. If you do have any questions on the previous section, please type them into the questions box, and we will try to address them at the end of the webinar. And again, I will be going through the application at the end of this presentation to illustrate where these folder rules are found and how to enable them. The next 3 slides contain additional folder settings which will impact bid calculations as well. These 2 folder settings are stretch targets and excluded dates. So first we have stretch targets. Stretch targets can be found on the folder settings page, like the bid rules, right under the forecast graph. When Marin calculates an optimal CPC, or initial bid for each keyword, it does so using a folder target, what your goal is of the folder, whether it's CPL, margin, ROI, or ROAS. So in the above screenshots, this is the number to the left. This is your main folder goal, where it says target CPL or target ROAS. The number to the right is the stretch target. If we're using a CPL model, the stretch target is called the maximum CPL. If we're using a performance marketer's model, the stretch target is called the minimum margin, ROI, or ROAS. Let me explain. Putting a target CPL of 185 and a maximum CPL of 220 will tell Marin that if the bid we calculate using a target CPL of 185 does not get the keyword on the first page, try calculating the bid using a target CPL of 220. That is, we are willing to pay more for a conversion if it gets our keyword on the first page. Similarly, putting a margin target of 32% and a minimum margin of 25% tells Marin that if using 32% in the bid calculation does not get the keyword on the first page, try calculating the bid targeting 25%. We're basically willing to sacrifice some of our margin in order to keep the keyword on the first page. How much margin? 7%. As you can tell, this is a far better alternative than the bid floor or the always keep above first page settings. We're still sacrificing some efficiencies for volume here, however, we're not doing so indiscriminately. There are much clearer boundaries, and these boundaries, most importantly, are results-based. Now we have excluded dates. The excluded dates settings is on the folder settings page. You have to click on the excluded dates folder specific link in this settings tab. It's on the top left of the slide. There are two types of excluded dates, static and rolling. And like Boost and the other bid rules, excluded dates are set at the folder level and apply to all keywords in the folder. Let's go over static excluded dates first. So simply put, anytime past performance is not indicative of future performance, we want to exclude those dates. Now, I'm not referring to slight efficiency gains, especially when we first turn on Marin. I'm referring to dates where there's extremely unusual performance that's not of the norm. So as we can see from this screenshot right here, this would be an unusually high spike in, say, revenue per conversion one day that we're not really accustomed to seeing and probably won't see again. Another reason for using static excluded dates is missing or inaccurate data. If we know that information during some time period was inaccurate or incomplete, we're going to want to exclude this information as well. So in the second graph on this slide, we see that click volume remained pretty constant this whole time. However, for a period of about 1 week, conversion volume just shut off. Now this looks like some excluded conversion information or just missing or inaccurate data. So in this case, we don't want to assume that this folder got no conversions and had a 0% conversion rate for that week. We want to exclude those dates, and we don't want to look at them in future bid calculations. So if you look to the bottom right, this is what the input box looks like for static excluded dates, and you can see we can put in all-inclusive time frames such as January 1st, 2013 through January 25th, 2013, or we can just put one day to exclude, such as May 2nd, 2013. And what this will do is basically tell Marin, never look at any of the information from keywords from these days. We're not going to use it in bid decisions. Next is rolling excluded dates. So rolling excluded dates is a window of days prior to the current day that we exclude from bid calculations. More simply put, let's use an example. A rolling date exclusion of 3 tells Marin every day to not look at the past 3 days when calculating bids. These excluded dates are called rolling because they will constantly change every day. For example, today is June 25th. Any folder with a rolling excluded date of 3 will not use June 22nd, 23rd, or 24th in bid calculations. We won't look at any information or data from those days. Tomorrow, on the 26th, we will not use June 23rd, 24th, or 25th in bid calculations. And of course, the next day, on the 27th, we won't use the 24th, 25th, or 26th. This is why they're called rolling excluded dates, as opposed to static excluded dates, which will always remain excluded and are the same dates every time. The most common reason for using this feature is latency. So latency is the time in days between when a user clicks to when the user converts. If users typically do not convert for, say, 7 days after the click, we would want to put a rolling date exclusion of 7 on the folder. This prevents us from underestimating true conversion rates over the past 7 days. So how do we decide in a number of days, or the sweet spot to kind of use as the cutoff for rolling date exclusion? It's a best practice at Marin. We advise to only exclude the number of days it takes for 80 to 85% of all conversions to come in. That is, if 70% of your conversions come in same day, 85% in 3 days, and 95% in 8 days, we only want to exclude 3 days. So the only reason we want 80 to 85% of conversions to come in, as opposed to, say, 99 or 100%, is that while using this rolling date exclusion will ensure data accuracy, it will also make us less reactive to the market. If we're not looking at keyword performance over the past 7 days, we're not reacting to any increases in competition or changes in the auctions that have recently occurred. So it is sort of a thin line on how long you want this rolling date exclusion to be. Ideally, we'd like to always have 100% of the information in before we use that information to bid. But we also want to be reactive. That's where we come up with the number of 80 to 85%. Another reason for using rolling excluded dates, though far less common, is to account for any lag in data uploads. This is usually not a problem. However, if we know that revenue or conversion information is not reported next day, we'd want to use a rolling date exclusion to account for this. For example, certain revenue tracking methods always have a 1-day delay. So in cases like this, we would want to use a rolling date exclusion of 1. The next topic and last topic in today's webinar is exploratory spend. Understanding what exploratory spend is and how to map it can lead to better initial results, can prevent overspending, and can get increased profits in the future. So exploratory spend refers to ad groups with little or no historical data. When keywords within these ad groups are trafficked and they have little or no historical data, they will use mostly folder-level information to make their bid decisions. And in short, the more information a keyword has, the more informed and accurate its bid decision will be. So because of this reason, ad groups with little or no historical data, we want to avoid trafficking them when we first turn on a folder. In order to meet the criteria for exploratory spend, the groups must meet 2 main criteria. They must have less than or equal to 10 clicks all time, and they must have 0 conversions all time. So think about the reasoning behind this. If an ad group has less than 10 clicks and 0 conversions all time, we simply don't know how the keywords within it will perform. We don't know if they're good, we don't know if they're bad. They haven't yet been given the chance. So we recommend mapping out all exploratory spend ad groups to a different folder before we traffic and leaving this folder off. Then, after a few weeks of trafficking, after boost adjustments have been made, after we've reached optimal level of efficiency and you're comfortable with the spend levels of your folder, if you do have some extra budget to spend, we can move these ad groups back in a little at a time. It is important to note that the cutoff of 10 clicks here, while it does apply to most accounts, can definitely vary from account to account. So if you know that a good keyword is likely to convert after only 5 clicks, that is, your account has very high conversion rates, you might want to lower this threshold to 5. You might want to say to yourself, if this keyword got 6 or 7 clicks and didn't convert yet, I know enough about this to bid it down at that point. Similarly, if your account has very low conversion rates, you may want to increase this threshold to 20 or even more. However, once a keyword receives a conversion, we can begin to estimate its individual performance and no longer include it in exploratory spend. So I will now go through the step-by-step process of mapping out exploratory spend once a folder has been set up. Of course, after the presentation, I will review this step-by-step in the application. So we do map folders on the add group level, therefore we map exploratory spend and define it as well on the add group level. The first thing we're going to do is drill into the folder and click on the Groups tab. And the next thing we need to do is bring in all the necessary columns to map a folder into the View Builder. So this is Account, Publisher, and Campaign. We also want to bring in clicks and conversions so we can filter out by the necessary criteria. Now that our view is set up correctly, we need to select a date range that will go back and grab all clicks and all conversions all the time. So since the date that our data is available, that's the date we want to start. In this example, this account started uploading data on the 1st of the year 2012. So when looking for those clicks and those conversions, we want to look all the way back to the 1st of 2012. And of course, once we selected this date range, we want to filter out exploratory spend. So in the grid, we filter for ad groups with less than or equal to 10 clicks and 0 conversions all time. Now, number 5 is very important and is often missed by a lot of people. We want to make sure that we click on the All Groups button on the bottom left of the grid. This will ensure that all groups that meet the criteria for exploratory spend are selected, regardless of whether or not they have received recent clicks. So sometimes the grid will not show all groups, especially the ones that haven't received a click in the last 2 months. In order for it to grab all groups, we want to make sure we click that button on the bottom left side. And last but not least, we will select all the groups by clicking the top left button right there, the Select All button, and then we click Map to Folder, and we move all groups on all pages to a new folder entitled Exploratory Spend. And we want to leave this folder off. So what next? We've trafficked for a couple of weeks, we're comfortable with our level of spend, we've reached the optimal efficiency, our folder's doing well, and we have some extra budget to spend. So now what we would do is recommend moving exploratory spend back in a little at a time. And what can you expect to see? First, there is going to be an initial increase in spend on the folder level and a decrease in profit. This is directly due to the cost involved in exploring the performance of these keywords, which may or may not bring us conversions. We simply don't know. After this initial exploratory period, these keywords will have much more historical information and we'll be able to make more informed bid decisions. We'll begin to bid the good ones up and we'll begin to bid the bad ones down. So during this time, we can expect ad spend to decrease and for profit to increase. And of course, we expect the ad spend to be a little higher than before we map them back in, and we expect the profit to be higher as well. So at this point, I'm just going to pause the presentation and bring the application up, and I will go through the application to illustrate the various topics I spoke about earlier. Okay. So here is our demo account, and in order to get to the folder settings page, the first topic discussed, first thing we're going to do is click on the bidding tab. This will bring us to a list of all of our folders. And once we're at this list, let's click on a folder. By clicking on the folder name, this will bring us inside the folder and directly to the settings tab. And that's where we are right now. So you could just ignore these forecast graphs here. Because this is a demo account, we don't have a lot of groups in it right now. However, when you go and put your folders on preview, you'll likely see a graph here that can help you decide on a folder target. And right below, we see the Rules section. We can open it up by clicking on this button to the right. And there are our various folder rules. First, we have the boost, and then the remaining applying bids rules. In order to enable a rule, what we do is that we click the check mark to the left of it, and we'd input our value to the right. Here, the minimum bid change would be set to 5 cents. And for it to take effect, we would click Save. And what's great about this tab is if we scroll down right here, we can actually see any changes that we made at any given time. to these settings. And so what that will help do is if we need to go back and kind of QA our performance during, say, the month of April, we can look back on that settings page and see which settings were in place during the month of April and gauge our performance that way. Let's practice setting the headroom. The boost. But when we first traffic a folder, we're going to want to bring headroom into the view builder and get the average headroom over the first 2 weeks. Let's make sure headroom is in the view builder. This is under traffic, and headroom is there. Now, in the date range, let's select the past 14 days in order to get the average headroom over the folder. And looking at winter sports, the one we were just in before, we can see that over the past 2 weeks, this average headroom was at 80.35%. This is going to be our starting point for boost. You'll likely have to adjust after a couple of days of trafficking to get your spend to where it needs to be. But when first trafficking, we want to make sure we set the boost equal to that percent. So we could just round down to 80% here. And of course, if we're going to be first trafficking today, we want to make sure that the best practice setting in place, maximum bid change at 25%. And we click Save. Now the next topic was these stretch targets right here. As you can see on a performance marketer's model, we can target a margin, ROI, or ROAS. Let's click on margin. This is our main folder level target. Every keyword in the folder will be calculated out to hit a certain target margin, and that's going to be based on the number that's inside this box right here. This is your main goal. After trafficking for a couple of weeks, if you want to set your stretch target, we would do that here. So in the example given before, when we have 32 and 25, this is telling Marin that if we don't get on the first page using this, let's try using this. And again, just a side note, we only want to set this after we've reached an optimal level of efficiency on the folder. When first trafficking a folder, we want to treat each keyword equally. And we want Marin to be able to see how these keywords perform when attempting to reach your main folder goal. Next we have Excluded Dates, and remember we get to this by clicking on the top left, Excluded Dates folder specific. Now let's say you wanted to exclude April 1st. This is actually for a different date format for a different international client, so April 1st would look like this. And what's nice about Marin is it has an example right here, and this is a variable. This will change depending on your date format, depending on where you are located. And of course a rolling excluded date, if you want to use them at all, you would check this box right here and input how many days. Let's say 7. Again, once we click Save, the algorithm will never look at the past 7 days, nor will it look at April 1st in any bid calculations. Let's take a look at Exploratory Spend. So there's only 2 groups in this folder. We're going to try and filter one of these out based on our Exploratory Spend criteria. You're likely to have far more groups in your folder when you actually go in traffic. Now the first thing we need to make sure is that we have all of the appropriate columns in here. So we want to have group, account, campaign, clicks, and conversions. Of course those are there right now, but just to show you where they're located, in the Settings tab we have account, publisher, and campaign. And in the Traffic Cost tab, we have clicks. And of course in the Conversions tab, we have conversions. The next thing we need to do is select a date range that will go grab every single piece of data since we've uploaded into Marin. That is, since we have clicks and conversions reporting into Marin, we want to grab all that data. So let's say we know that that's as of April 1st. And so click on clicks right here and filter out. Let's go to less than or equal to 10 and 0 conversions. As you can see, we now found the one exploratory spend group. Let's just make sure it's only this one group by clicking on the bottom left All Groups button. And once this filters out, you'll be able to see that, yes, this is the only group that meets that criteria in the folder. For some clients, you'll receive a lot more groups down there, depending on how many clicks it got in the last 2 months or 12 months. Now, most importantly, let's map this out of this folder and into a new folder entitled Exploratory Spend. Top left, we'll grab all of the groups and the Map to Folder button. We want to create a new folder, and we want to name that folder Exploratory Spend. And clicking Save will put that in the new folder. I see some of you have typed in questions into the message box. That's great. We will be getting to them very shortly. First, let me turn it over to Makiko.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining our bidding rules and exploratory spend webinar today. As mentioned earlier, if there are any of you who would like to type in additional questions, please do so on the webinar application. These webinars are recorded and will be made available to those who registered, and also through the help section that you can navigate to on the upper right-hand side of our platform. If you search for webinars in help, you'll be able to bring a lot of our pre-recorded sessions and a calendar of upcoming sessions as well for any other topics that you may be interested in. So we'll go into some of these questions, and we'll have Erin answer them as we go along. One of the questions here related to exploratory spend is why do we have to wait a few weeks before I traffic anything from exploratory spend? And this is in regards to when you do have the extra money to spend.
Okay, now that is a very good question. So one of the main reasons, as mentioned before, that we map out exploratory spend is to basically inhibit a drastic increase in pub cost when first trafficking. If you do have this extra money to spend, the first thing I would say is keep this in mind. If you have 1,000 or 2,000 or even 500 ad groups in your folder, and they are exploratory spend, and we don't know how they'll perform, even just getting 1 or 2 clicks a day on those keywords will add up to a lot of cost. Oftentimes it is underestimated how much cost it will add up to. The algorithm will take care of this naturally by bidding groups down over time if they get no conversions, but it will result in upfront cost. So we want to traffic them slowly instead of all at once. If you do have the money to spend, I would still recommend either not trafficking them right away or trafficking them a little at a time. The other reason is because we want to be able to see how Marin is spending money right away after we kick off bidding. And we want to be able to see if we're spending too much or too little. This will certainly cloud the issue if there's a lot of exploratory spend in there. And it will be basically harder to make decisions on increasing or decreasing boost, which really is the most important thing after we first traffic. So basically it makes folder level results not as interpretable when first trafficking, when that's the time where they really need to be interpretable.
Great. Thank you very much, Erin. The next question is, what should I set the stretch targets to after trafficking?
Okay, good. So just to clarify, after trafficking, we usually mean after a couple of weeks when the folder has hit its optimal efficiency or it has reached your goal. Now, if you want to utilize the stretch target, that is, you want to give those keywords not getting on the first page another chance, you're willing to spend more money, sacrifice some efficiency, the general rule of thumb that we advise is no more than 20% different than your main target. So, for example, if your CPL goal is 10, we wouldn't set it higher than 12. If it's 20, we wouldn't set it higher than 24. If your margin target is 50, we wouldn't set it lower than 40%. The basic idea here is we want to avoid bidding on poor performing keywords as much as possible. So keeping this stretch target too lenient will lead to a lot of inefficient spend. Also, it will lead to a lot of bidding on more and more keywords off the second page or on the first page. And you'll notice that a larger and larger portion, depending on how lenient you are, is most likely going to be utilizing this feature. And again, until folder level results are almost uninterpretable. That is, we're not really targeting your main goal anymore. So we do want to keep this somewhat tightly knit and close to your folder goal. That's why I kind of say 20%.
Great, and we'll go ahead and address the next question. I think this is a great one. When I make changes to the folders, when do these changes take effect?
That is a very good question. So typically we will traffic bids at 5 p.m. local time to you. So if you make changes at 2 p.m., they will take effect the next time bidding runs, or that day, which is 5 p.m. If you make changes at 7 p.m., again, they will take effect the next time bidding runs, but that won't be until the next night. Furthermore, what you should keep in mind is that, let's say it's Tuesday, and you make changes at 3 or 4 o'clock. They'll get pushed at 5 o'clock, yet only on Thursday will you be able to see Wednesday's full results and one day's full results of bidding with these new settings. So oftentimes it takes at least 2 days to really see the reaction of the algorithm and the performance that you've gotten when you've changed these settings. So always keep that in mind. That's kind of why we never like to traffic a folder after Wednesday night. And so on Friday we want to be able to see Thursday's results, our first full day, and adjust settings from there.
Great. And the last question we'll be addressing today is, with so many settings available and rules available, how can I tell which keywords are using which of the folder rules?
Again, very good question. It's a little off topic from this webinar, the explanation, but there is a summary tab. So the settings is the most far right tab. The summary tab is far left. And if you click on this tab, there is an option called Spend by Bid Category. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's basically the proportion of spend on the folder level that is hitting each keyword. Unfortunately, this account, we cannot illustrate this at that time, but you will see a graph there with, say, 8 different or 7 different rules that can hit in different colors. And on the pie chart, you'll be able to see which keywords and how much spend is responsible for is being affected by those rules. So some red flags you might want to watch out for. If you click on that tab and you see that 75% of your folder is hitting a bid cap of $50 or whatever it is, we know that you may need to either adjust your folder's goals or take off the bid cap.
Great. Thank you very much, Erin. We'll be wrapping up today's webinar, but again, please feel free to reference any of the recorded webinars and any of our articles that are available within the help section. We have some great bidding-related articles as well, including a step-by-step walkthrough of how to set up bidding within Marin. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and please do utilize these webinars and articles available in the help section. Thank you very much.